Hi everyone, thanks for watching. I'm Lauren from Guthrie and Ganny, and in this video I want to share with you my top selection of essential tools and equipment that you need if you're going to be dressmaking or making your own clothes. So I do have a blog post that goes alongside this video where I list all of these things and link to where you can purchase them in my online shop as well. So do check out the description to this video so you can find out where to get all of these things. But whether you're brand new to dressmaking or you're maybe just getting a bit more serious about your hobby and thinking, yeah, like I really want to just make sure that I've got all the right equipment, then hopefully this will act like a bit of a checklist for you and you can just make sure that you've got everything you need to make dressmaking as fun as possible. One of the great things about making your own clothes is that there's so many different gadgets out there, different tools, different bits and pieces, and you can start to really collect like a range of whole different tools and notions and gadgets and all that sort of thing. But I've tried to kind of narrow it down so it's not an overwhelming list, but they're things that I personally find really useful in my own dressmaking journey. I've been making my own clothes for well over 10 years now, and I pretty much make everything that I wear, and these are the things that I use day in, day out when I'm doing my dressmaking. So first of all, I'm going to go through the essentials. I'm going to talk about the types of machines that I use as well, and then some extra tools and gadgets that I just personally find that I use quite a lot as well. So top of the list is this little bundle that I've got here. And I don't think I could pick like one thing because you definitely need all of them. So in no particular order, but this is my top list here. I have got a measuring tape or tape measure, and I specifically like this one because on each side of the tape measure, the number one starts at opposite ends. So it doesn't matter what way you pick the tape measure up, you can just flip it over and you're always going to be near a number one. And I also like having the inches and centimetre units on the same side of the tape measure, because here in the UK, I sometimes feel like we're a bit stuck in the middle in terms of what units that we use, and I often flip between the two. North American things tend to be more imperial measurements, so it's like inches and yards, and then the European patterns, they tend to be more in centimetres and metres, and then yeah, I just sort of flip between the two, so I like having both available on the same side as well. So that is my tape measure. In terms of other types of measuring things as well, I've got a couple of different types of seam gauges here. There are lots of seam gauges you can get, but I like using both of these ones. This is a Prim Love one, and it goes up to 21 centimetres, which I find quite useful just to have a firm, straighter line. You know, obviously you can measure things with a tape measure, but if I have to like draw a specific line that's a bit longer, but I don't want like a really big ruler, then I find this one really useful for that. It is just in centimetres. And then I've also got this little aluminium one as well, and the benefit of it being aluminium is that it doesn't distort or warp if it gets too hot. If you have this one too near the iron, or you like accidentally iron over it, it will sort of melt and distort, whereas the aluminium one's just a bit firmer than that, and it doesn't sort of bend at all. So it's got various different measuring sections on it, and then just like a general ruler as well. So I find that one quite useful too. When it comes to cutting, I do have paper scissors, which I've not listed here, but I just want to mention it because I'm very strict about having paper scissors and fabric scissors. These are my fabric scissors here, and I have been using them for, it must be like 6 years maybe now. They're Prim micro serration ones, and they are the Kai blades, so they're made in Japan. And I really love the micro serration ones because the blade has got tiny little teeth on it that help to grip the fabric as you're cutting. So they're really good for thin, slippery fabrics because it helps to just control them a bit better. And it is also good for the opposite as well, like really thick fabrics or fabrics where there's lots of layers, because as you're cutting, it's almost like the teeth want to grip into the fabric a little bit rather than pushing it away. So I find that they're really good, and they're still sharp after all this time. As I said, I am very careful with them. I do not cut anything other than fabric. I make sure that I don't accidentally cut any pins that can cause like little snags in the blade of the scissors as well. So yeah, if you keep them in good condition, they stay sharp for a really long time, and I use these a lot. And then also just having like a smaller pair of snips are quite useful as well. These are cute little stork ones. I seem to have managed to collect various small pairs of scissors over the year, but sometimes it's useful just to have a smaller pair of scissors for cutting threads, or maybe like clipping into a seam allowance, or yeah, just making smaller cuts, basically buttonholes, that sort of thing. So yeah, small pair of embroidery scissors, they're regularly called as well, are also very useful. So that is measuring and cutting. And then next on my list are decent pins. So I like using the Prim glass-headed ones, and I find that these are like a good all-rounder. I use them on a wide variety of different types of fabrics. Generally find that they're better quality than plastic head pins that I can get, or that I've sort of used before. They're a nice thickness, they don't sort of snag fabric too much, and I keep mine on my little G&G wooden pin magnet. There are various different types of pin magnets that you can get, but these lovely pin magnets here are ones that we had made locally here in Birmingham just for us. And they've just got a really nice sort of aesthetic to them. So there's a magnet sort of sunk in the wood, which helps to grip all of the pins onto it. I do also have some fine pins as well, which would be good for like very fine fabrics, like a very fine viscose or a silk. And I do keep them separate to my regular pins, because if you use those fine pins on thicker fabric, they can bend quite easily. They must only be used on fine pins. So if you are going to have different types of pins, you have to sort of have some kind of system or be quite strict about keeping them separate. That's my tip. And then while we're on pins, we'll move on to needles. And I absolutely love keeping my hand sewing needles in one of these needle twisters. Again, it's a Prim needle twister, and it works a bit like a lipstick. So it's got that lid on it that you pull off, and then you twist it up, and then it just fans all the needles out. So it makes it really easy to sort of see all the different needles and then just pull them off. So it's a little magnet that holds them in the bottom there, and then you can just spin it and close it up again. So that is really good for storing hand sewing needles. And then finally, in the sharps department, I have got an unpicker or a quick unpick or a seam ripper, all sort of refer to the same thing really, which is this thing here, which is when you make a mistake, which is inevitable. I basically use one every time I make a project at some point. It's just a way that you can unpick the stitches. So it's got a little blade in it. That bottom sort of curved section there is where it's sharp. So you use the longer pointy blade. You can use that to kind of fish into your stitches and then push, and then the little blade at the bottom will cut the threads. So very useful to have one of them as well. And then when it comes to actually making marks on your fabric, of course you can do tailor's tacks. You've got your hand sewing needles for that and some thread. And then I do have just a few different types of markers as well that I tend to use quite a bit. So the first one is this Clover Cho Liner, and I really like these ones because it gives a very precise, sharp, crisp line. So it's really good if you want to draw in a stitch guide on something, because it always gives a nice sharp line, rather than like a big block of tailor's chalk, which can be hard to be quite accurate, like make a really accurate marking with that. So the way that this works is that there's a tiny wheel at the nib of it, and as that wheel turns round, it dispenses the loose chalk that is in the cartridge, and these cartridges are replaceable as well, which is quite good. They come in a variety of different colours as well. So I use that quite a lot. I tend to use it more on the back of fabric, because depending on the type of fabric, sometimes if you put it on the outside of the fabric, it can be a little bit harder to remove. So I tend not to use it in places where it will be very visible once the garment's finished. So I would, a classic example would be like marking in a dart, like drawing in the legs of a dart. I would use that. And then I do also use my Clover Cho pencils as well. These come in a pack, and you get a few pencils in it. You get a sharpener as well, and different colours basically, which is obviously useful depending on what type of fabric you're using. And the reason I specifically really like these pencils is because I find that they're not as waxy as some other pencils, so it generally is easier to just just draw on the fabric where you need to, and they sharpen quite well as well. So once you sharpen them, they stay fairly sharp. So if you need to do like a dot or something, then they're quite good for that too. And yeah, I just find that they're, out of all of the different types of chalk pencils that I've tried, they generally just sort of work the best for me. So I really like that one. Another one that's good for being very accurate is this Prim Cartridge pencil here. And this basically works like the same way that just a regular writing cartridge pencil would work too. So you can get the little, effectively like lead refills or like chalk refills that are like the very, very fine sticks. And you put them into the pen and you click it, and then your nib comes out. And they are good again for doing very precise marking, because obviously it's a very fine point. So yeah, if there's like a little dot you have to mark, or a little line, or maybe a little cross or something, it's just another really good accurate way to be marking something on your fabric. So that is my sort of top essentials that I would say I can't really sew without them. I use them all the time. Now on to the machines, and I do get asked a lot of questions about machines, like what machine do I use, or I want to upgrade my machine, what machine should I buy? I do have a separate blog post that is all about things that you might want to consider when you're either buying a sewing machine for the first time or you're looking to upgrade, because it's almost like a whole different topic. So I'll link to that in the description to the video as well, so you can check that if you're wanting more specific advice on how to pick a sewing machine. The machine that I've got out here is the ones that we use here in the G&G Sewing Studio, where we teach all of our classes. And this is the Brother Innovis NV1300. And we find that they're really good. They're very reliable. It's got a nice big space under here. And it's got lots of other nice functions too, like the needle threader. And you can control the position of the needle, whether it's up or down. The cutter, the thread cutter as well. Lots of stitches. Speed control. So yeah, the students that come on the workshops here at Guthrie and Gannett really enjoy using these machines, but there's so many different types of machines out there. But yeah, if you're watching this from a stance of a complete beginner who doesn't have anything, you are going to need a sewing machine to do your dressmaking. And yeah, for more specific advice on that, just check out my other blog post. It's got lots of really good hints and tips for things to consider when you're picking one. The other thing that I get asked about a lot as well is an overlocker. Do I need an overlocker? Should I get one? And the one that I've got out here, again, this is the one that I use at home. It's also the ones that we have here for our overlocking workshops and our sewing workshops at Guthrie and Gannett. And this is the Janome 6234XL. And I'm pretty happy with it. I've been using it for a long time. It does what I need it to do, and it's been pretty reliable. My general kind of headline advice is, if you're thinking about getting an overlocker, or like trying to decide should I or shouldn't I get an overlocker, is really like, how serious are you about your dressmaking hobby? How much time do you spend on it? How many things are you actually making? Because it can make a really big difference to the finish of your garments, and it can make construction of certain garments a bit quicker as well. So if you're really getting into dressmaking, you're making a lot of your own clothes and spending a lot of time on it, then I personally would say it's worth the investment. I use mine a lot. And then the next sort of piece of equipment, or kind of machinery if you like, that I wanted to mention was an iron as well, and an ironing board. I don't have an iron to show you, but I think it is worth mentioning it, because when you are doing dressmaking, you do need a good iron. You need to have your ironing board up and out with the iron on as you're sewing, because pressing seams, pressing fabrics, steaming things are all really good ways to get a much better finish on the clothes that you're making. I have used mostly the Philips brand over the years. I'm not an ambassador or anything. This is not an ad. I have bought all of my Philips irons over the years, and generally been pretty happy with them. At the moment, I've got a Tefal one, which is good. And I would say the most important feature to look for in an iron is that it's got a good steam function. Steam is very important when you're dressmaking, and you want to make sure that your iron can support that and offer you a good steam function. And And then, you know, there's just other things that you might want to consider with an iron, like the weight of it and that sort of thing. But I would say you don't need to go like really, really high end with an iron. I tend to go more kind of like the higher end of what I suspect is probably like the low range of all the irons you can get, like low to mid rate. High, low to mid range is typically what I go for. So yeah, but making sure that you've got a good iron and also a nice padded ironing board as well. If the cover on your ironing board is quite thin and flimsy, then depending on what your ironing board is made of, sometimes those, like say it's a metal frame that's almost like a sort of mesh and you've got quite a thin cover on it, then sometimes the sort of imprint of that can come through onto your fabric. So making sure that you've got a good quality sort of padded, a heat reflective ironing board cover can be quite good as well. And then finally is just another little selection of other tools that I just commonly use. So I maybe don't use them like every single time I'm dressmaking, but I do still use them quite a bit. So I have got a hot hammer, which if you follow me on Instagram, you might have seen me talk about this before. It looks quite simple, but it's actually very useful. It's like a gridded bit of sort of firm felt, and you can iron on it and it doesn't melt or distort or change shape at all. And it makes pressing back hems, for example, much easier, because as you fold the fabric back, you can measure it and then you can press on top of it, and this is sort of sandwiched in between. And it just gives a really nice, crisp, even press. So you can get various different ones. They do also now come in inches as well. This one's centimetres. This is the one that I've had for the longest. I've probably used it the most, but you can get like longer, thinner ones as well. So yeah, it just gives you like a longer surface, obviously, and this has got a little curved bit on it as well. So yeah, the hot hammer is really good too. I also use quite a lot, this is probably the next thing that I use the most, I would say, is the quilting ruler. This is quite a small one, it's 6.5 by 6.5 inches. I do also have a really long one as well that's, I'm pretty sure it's the same width as this, but I think it's maybe more like, I don't know, it's maybe more like 24 inches or something. And I use this a lot when I'm maybe drawing on patterns, like maybe if I'm adding in a short and lengthen line and I'm trying to get a right angle. I use it if I'm making my own bias binding or bias tape, then I'll use it to sort of measure and draw the lines on that as well. So yeah, I do use it a lot, even though it's a quilting ruler. I'm not necessarily using it for quilting. I do use it for dressmaking purposes, but I guess the main sort of benefit function of it is that it helps you to get things square. So that's what I like it for. And then I'm going to show you these next, because I do use these quite a bit. These are the Prim Vario pliers, which again, I do have a whole separate video on. I show you all the different types of things that you can do with these Vario pliers. And you use them to apply things like poppers or jeans buttons, rivets, eyelets, all that sort of thing to your garments, and yeah, I find them really good. Prim have now also brought out the creative tool as well, which basically does the same thing as the pliers, but it's a bit easier to control because it's a device that clips onto the table. So it's just a bit more stable, and yeah, you're not having to use as much hand and grip strength to sort of squeeze the pliers together. You can kind of just push down with the creative tool, but they both essentially do the same job. So yeah, it would be your sort of preference there. These are much cheaper. The creative tool I think is almost £100, but this is I can't remember off the top of my head how much this is, but it's linked in the blog post anyway. And then also kind of to go with the Vario pliers is a hole punch as well. And this just makes holes in a fabric. So I will use this if I say I'm putting a rivet on some jeans and I'm having to put the rivet through quite a lot of layers. I'll make the hole first with the hole punch. Or if I'm putting anorak snaps on a jacket, and again, there's quite thick layers, it's quite a dense fabric, I'll make a little hole first in the fabric so that I can then put my fastener on it afterwards. So yeah, it kind of goes alongside the vario pliers really. And then I have got this one here, which is a loop turner. And this is really good for turning tubes of fabric through. So the idea is that you can make a very fine, narrow, turned out tube of fabric effectively by sewing it and then feeding this through, and then you sort of hook it onto the fabric. You flick this little kind of leg up, it secures the fabric, and then you can pull it inside out. And because it's very, very narrow, you can't, you know, if you get the knack right, you can make a really, really narrow rouleau loop, it's called. So yeah, I quite enjoy using it. I find it quite satisfying. I know that some people find it a little bit trickier to use, but the key really is getting your fabric snagged properly in that hook with the little sort of leg bit at the top. And then the final two things are buttonhole related. So I have got, first of all, I've got the Simflex, which is an expanding sewing gauge that helps you just to spread out your buttons really evenly. And it's just a much quicker way to sort of measure and mark the position of your buttonholes, because as you sort of collapse or expand it, then those little spokes just stay the same distance apart, basically. So yeah, it can just be a bit of a quicker way to mark the position of your buttons. And then once you've actually sewn your buttons in, your buttonholes in, then you can use this little Clover buttonhole cutter, which effectively is like a little chisel. It's very satisfying to use. You do need something to protect the surface you're working on when you use this one, so like a self-healing mat or something, or a little block of wood can do the job as well. And you just need to apply downward pressure through the buttonhole, and then it cuts the buttonhole open, like a little block of cheese. And yeah, it is very satisfying. So that is that is my roundup of my sort of top selection of tools. As I said in the beginning, there are so many different ones, but hopefully this just kind of narrows the things down for you a little bit. I think that certainly that list that I gave you at the start are like the key things that you're going to need for dressmaking success. So if you've got any questions or comments at all, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. If you want a quick answer to anything, you need any help with anything, then the G&G team and I are always more than happy to help, and it's best to call or email the shop for that. And again, I'll put the contact details in the video for that. But thank you so much for watching, and if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, then don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss out on my next video. And I'll see you next time. Bye.